Well, hello and welcome to the Edgewood 4G podcast. My name's Kyle Parks. I'm the discipleship pastor here at Edgewood. And yeah, we're just excited to be here today with our worship pastor. This is Chad Doran.
That's right. That's not important. But yeah, it's good to be here, and this is my inaugural
first time on
podcast. Man. And I was just saying that if this goes as planned, it would be my last one because I'll do such a poor job with our back and forth conversation here that they'll be like, let's get other staff in here for this.
Oh my goodness. Now, Chad, you've been here for like 9 years, is that right?
This summer it will be 9. Yeah. 9 years.
Because you were the summer before.
Yeah, started in July, and you came almost exactly that a year later.
Yep.
So, it's been a good run, and we've been busy here.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of that 9 years was when we were in the thick of our facility renovation and expansion.
Yeah.
Which I don't think after that project we were all ready to do it again.
Right.
I think we were very grateful for the improvements, but man, that was a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
And took a lot of focus to be part of that and to get us to where we were when we were finally done with it.
Yep.
Then what happens? We have a pandemic.
Yep. We had this nice new large facility, and then we weren't able to use it for a while.
Yeah, I had all these, and it wasn't just me. Other team members were thinking, okay, we got through that. Now we can kind of find a stride and get back to more normal type ministry. And oh my goodness, we couldn't have been more wrong.
Yep. Well, thanks for coming on today, Chad. And, as Chad is a worship pastor, you actually wear lots of hats and do lots of different things. So what are some of those other things that you kind of head up and do around here?
Sure. Right now, I'm engaged a lot with our communications and our media and things like the website and the mobile app and a lot of putting a lot of graphic design things together for our church. And, we see all those things on the weekend, of course, but, just those digital properties is what they're called.
Okay.
These websites and apps and e-newsletters and things like that, just trying to help communicate what's going on at Edgewood and trying to help people be engaged with that.
Yeah.
That's really the heart of trying to do that well. And boy, we've got a lot going on right now. 2024 is kind of got off to a really strong start with a lot of opportunities to gather, to grow, give, and go with the gospel. So it's good to see that.
Yeah. You also dabble in a bit of stage design.
Yes. Yeah. I enjoy doing that. My partner in crime, Dave Bennett.
You keep him in line as
that's
well.
Right.
That's a big job for you.
That's right. And you mentioning the stage design is actually a good segue into a little bit more of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you were around Edgewood just like 6 weeks ago or so, you noticed that the stage design was very simple for a couple of weeks after our Christmas series, and that was a little bit by design, but also because I was out of pocket for a good chunk of the beginning of the year, a little bit over a week, and where I was, I was actually in Florida, but it's not what you think. It's not completely what you think. I was actually taking a course at a theological graduate school down there in biblical worship.
Yeah.
And it was a great course, but I tell you what, that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
I remember
those short ones you got to pack in a lot.
Oh yeah, it was called an intensive, right? And the other programs that they have at that school, the programs, they involve multiple intensives, right? I'm not doing a graduate program, but it's just interesting because it's kind of they need to lead with the intensive. It's really intense, and a lot of stuff. I remember giving a quick report one time to the team here, just going, "Hey guys, I'm don't have a whole lot of time to even give an update
Right.
because I'm like on campus where this school was meeting. I'm on like campus like over 12 hours a day, and it was it was really good. It was refreshing. It definitely a change of pace, but got into a lot of a really great content and discussions. Made some good connections and friends with the others that are part of the program. So that's what little bit what we're going to be sharing. As we talk through and have a conversation.
So definitely want to talk about that, what you learned there, but then also just worship ministry here and how you define that. But then, so before we get into that, though, Chad, just from your perspective, you're on stage each week. You kind of get a sense and a feel and a look out over perspective of everything happening on the weekends. But how would you describe just this season we're in at Edgewood and what God's doing here? From your perspective, what does that look like?
Sure. Well, one thing that's really nice to see is I mentioned the pandemic earlier, but it's been nice to see more people come back to worship and to gather, but we're seeing lots of new faces as well. And the sense that I get is that I think people are yearning to go deeper. We have a real strong value with that grow value. And no doubt that I think people come, they're eager to get into the Word. Most people that come are ready for a really solid biblical sermon. And I've been noticing also that there's more engagement. People are engaging in worship. We'll get into more of the specifics about that, but what I mean by worship is they're engaging in our singing worship, because our sermons are worship too. Even our announcements time is worship. And our prayers are worship. All those things. But it's nice to see people engaging, and that's just been really encouraging to see that.
Yeah, we've had more and more people gathering each week. We see new people all the time. It's very encouraging season here, I would say, at Edgewood. And, so when you think about, worship, as we're talking about with you, like you said, a lot of times people think of worship as just music. They think of worship in a certain sense. But how would you define worship as a worship pastor when we know it goes beyond just music? It goes beyond just singing. So what's your definition there?
Sure. I'll share my current definition. This is a definition that has been developed over, it's odd to say, but decades.
It's always unfolding.
Because I've been serving in similar roles for over 25 years now. So a big premium has been put on how do you define worship, and as I share my official definition, you can see how I'm just trying to pack as much into it as possible. So it can get quite technical, but hopefully this comes across. So
I'm on the edge of my seat, man. Let's hear it.
I know. I'm setting this up to be. I'm setting this up to be epic. Incidentally, one of the assignments that I had during this class, I was able to work a little bit more and develop this.
That's good.
This definition a little bit more.
Okay.
So here it is. We need sound effects in the studio, like drum rolls and
Dave,
things like that. Stuff and things to really make explosions and things.
We'll add it in post.
Yeah, we can. We'll add all those things in post. And if you're seeing these things right now in post, you can thank Dave, because Dave would have he would have had to make that happen.
And if not, you can blame Dave.
That's right. If it's just not, right.
Oh, my word.
All right. So back to that definition. So this is the definition that I have: is worship is responding with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We've heard those words in Mark chapter 12.
Yeah.
In love, honor, adoration, gratefulness, and submission to who God is and to what God has done, so that, that's a kind of a big thing, so that God is ultimately glorified and others are edified.
Okay. Very good. So responding to God for who he is, what he's done, so that, and to bring him glory through that worship,
Right.
and so that others are edified. But then so we can grow as well.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
Yeah. In a nutshell.
You did pack a lot in there. That's good. That's really good.
It is packed. If you had asked me this question 15, 20 years ago, I would have had more of it being, worship is responding to who God is and what God has done, But
the first part.
Yeah. It's like, worship is this vertical thing, it's just about me or us or whatever, and God. But as the years have gone on, the more I've read, this class I took reinforced it big time. Worship is formational, and it's not just about me.
Yeah.
It's formational for us.
Yeah. So God has grown your theology of the church.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely.
It's really
Absolutely.
good. Love it, man. So Pastor Brian on the last podcast was kind of walking through kind of the day in the life of a pastor, and I loved it. I thought it was really good. I think it's good for people to understand and know that we do more than stuff just one day a week, and there is prep that gets, that goes into things. And,
right, yeah, we just show up. And
right, yeah. So, he's talking about kind of day in the life, that type of thing. So for you, what goes into planning a worship service? What are some of the steps you take? When does that start for you? And what does that kind of look like?
Sure. So there's a lot of different aspects to doing worship ministry in the way that Edgewood does it.
Yeah.
If you would ask a worship leader, a worship pastor from another context,
Yep.
They might explain things a little bit differently.
Sure.
But for me, it's always kind of this balancing act, because as you try to put all the pieces together for a worship service, one thing kind of affects another thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's that domino kind of effect, and then other times just one thing is like, hey, this is the biggest important thing, so we're gonna kind of build around that. So I think the elements of the worship planning process, it practically, we have a team that we have to help lead. So the scheduling of the team and our musicians is pretty important. So if we have certain people involved in the team, then it's like, that might impact a little bit how we choose songs, for example. So there's all these little dynamics that happen, but obviously the goal is to have all of those. What was the word I used just a minute ago? It kind of went out of my head. The practical, yeah.
Practical, there it is.
Yeah. So the idea is to kind of have the practical things taken care of, but then you can get into the real meat of stuff, where I can look at what the text is that Pastor Brian or whoever is preaching, whether it's you or anybody else, look at the text, and then while it's not always our highest priority to have a thematic service where everything is all fit together in this big thematic thing. It's always good to look, hey, what from the sermon text can influence where we start building the music and the song list. Yeah. And it's usually not very hard, because the good thing about Edgewood is we are a gospel-driven church. Everything goes back to the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, at this class I was at, one of the big things that they were really talking about was worship is about the story of God. And what's the story of God? Well, that's the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So if a Christian church is not gospel saturated in their preaching
Mm-hmm.
or in their singing, or if the gospel just isn't there, well then one author basically says, well, you can't call it Christian worship because it's just not.
Yeah.
It doesn't compute.
Yeah.
I might be going on a little tangent here, but to wrap up this this idea of worship planning, you have those practical side of things. You have the theological planning side of things with the text, and then also you just have to think of what else is happening. Do we do we have baptisms? Like this coming weekend, we have baptisms. Is it a communion weekend? Those things are going to impact.
We have interviews at the end.
Right. Do we have
testimonies?
Do we have a go-team partner that's visiting, And so all of those things are in there. And and sometimes we work it for, as the week goes on. And then at some point, we're like, okay, we got to lock this in.
Yeah, right.
But then there's other weekends where, it's Saturday afternoon. And we're still moving things around because,
from whatever happened during that week.
Right. We try not to do that, but there's always that possibility that we just need this to fit in a certain way and make sense going from one thing to the next. So
well, I know one thing that's challenging for you and Brian in particular. It could be a great weekend, but then Monday it comes every week. And then you're already thinking about the next weekend.
Right.
You're trying to get those things in place, the key players, the people a part of the team. And not everyone confirms that they can be a part of that. Or sometimes you got cancellations and you have to flex last minute. Hey, I know you do a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, life happens.
Yep.
Life happens, and it's happening for every one of our team members. So when something comes up, they have to bow out, or then we're finding replacements. But you know what? To be honest, at the end of the day, God provides.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes when things are just really falling apart, I've come to think, you know what? Maybe the Lord wants this weekend to be more
That's good.
Straightforward. And so when something happens, I mean, goodness, as we were dealing with COVID, I mean, I remember a couple of weekends where, I just lost half the team because they got ill. Yeah. And so we just go with the flow a little bit. Yeah. It can be frustrating. It can, you can kind of start really questioning, like, man, really again, but at the same time, after all these services go by, it's you look back and it's like, you know what, that's really what the Lord had us need at that moment.
It's a great perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, for worship ministry, but for life in general. Things don't always go according to plan. Perhaps God had something better.
However, Brian has recently said, the church is God's plan A. Uh-huh. There is no plan B. But I guess in the functions of the church,
sure, that's okay.
We have A, B, C, D, E. As we go through life and ministry together.
Definitely.
So
that's definitely part of it. So circling back to your worship intensive you went to in January, what were just a couple key takeaways from that? Some things that you pulled from that you learned, or maybe you were reminded of, but then perhaps you've put into practice already here.
Sure. Well, I already mentioned the story of God.
Yep.
God's redemption and salvation, the gospel. That was just refreshing when we started getting into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then this other thing, there's this word that is a very church word. We don't use it a lot around here, but the word liturgy.
Uh-huh.
And every church has a liturgy.
Mm.
I mean, obviously we're not using that word to describe what
Right.
our worship services.
Right.
But really, it was kind of neat to go back into the old languages, the original languages, and look, okay, where did that word come from? What does that mean? And that liturgy word comes from, I'm going to butcher this, but it
Just to your
it
best.
sounds very similar to what it is today, but liturgia,
Okay.
and it literally means the work of the people. So, but in our day and age, we kind of think of it as, it's our order of worship service. So it was neat to kind of see that. Nobody's saying, hey, we need to use this word now on everything. But it's just interesting as we were discussing that in that class, that every church does have a liturgy. You can have churches that claim, hey, we don't do liturgy, but you have a liturgy.
Yeah.
Even if that
Right.
liturgy is simple as we show up, we have an opening prayer, we sing 2 songs, then we have a sermon, and then we sing a song at the end, and then everybody goes home.
All right, that's an order.
That's still a liturgy.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me to be thinking of that and trying to understand that. Another thing that I think that was really cool was this idea of that our worship is primarily content. That's the important thing. And then there's a structure to that content.
Right.
And then finally there's a style to that content.
Okay.
This content, structure, and style.
Okay.
But as we explored that a little bit more, we easily could recognize that why is it that so many of us get that backwards? We think of, we want to have our service have this style. So we start with style, musical style, any other type of style. And then we'll have a structure to it. And then, then we'll fill it in. We'll backfill it basically with content.
Yeah.
But that's completely backwards. So that was, a cool thing.
Yeah.
And then I think I got 2 more of these things. And this was challenging for me. And this is like new growth in my understanding. And it is kind of cool because we just came off of a sermon series in November about the Trinity.
Yeah.
So we spent some time in this class talking about worship, the Trinitarian values and understanding of worship. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, really, it is so powerful. So I'm looking forward to finding ways to help us understand this more.
Okay.
And it's something we can do over time.
Good.
But I have a quote I would love to share because we need to recognize that worship is only possible. And one author, his name is Zach Hicks, he says it like this.
Okay.
It's only possible because there was a decidedly Trinitarian action from God. We can't worship if it weren't for God who made it possible. And so here's a quote. It's a little bit longer quote, but it's just so good. So this author's name is Zach Hicks, so here it is. Not only has the Trinity saved us to worship, He has completed and perfected worship for us so that our worship might be acceptable. We often forget that it is not only Jesus' death that is applied to us by the Spirit, but His life as well. Where we fail miserably in our feeble attempts at worship, Jesus succeeded fully. The perfect worship that the Father demands has found all its qualifications met in the Son's righteous living. both his personal piety and his fully obedient participation in corporate worship while on earth, by the power of the Spirit, we are united with the Son, clothed in his righteous worship, such that the Father sees his worship as we worship. Jesus worships for us. So, I know that's kind of deep.
That was rich.
But
Wow.
One way to think of it is Jesus is our worship leader.
Mm.
So for me, that's kind of nice to think of.
Right.
It doesn't depend on me.
Right.
Jesus did it. So that was kind of a really cool thought there.
That's good. I noticed too, you've been kind of doing some more stuff with the benediction, trying to put that more at the end, and reading scripture over people, probably a little bit more than before. So that's good.
Saturate our worship, our corporate worship through music, with the scripture.
Yep.
And one item that I've been developing even before the class, but the class helped me even more, is to recognize this call to worship.
Yeah.
Some people might have recognized, Chad's becoming a little bit more formal as we're beginning the service, and that's intentional, because we need to realize that we're called to worship. We don't make worship ourselves happen. So I remember sharing a quote from a book, and then always having scripture in there. So those things are great. Yeah, the benediction part of things is so fantastic. I remember one part in this class. I remember we were talking about different service elements, and we were talking about the sending, how we dismiss. And I was just really bummed out, because I had discovered and realized, man, there's been so many times where I've just blown it, where I've been like, hey, everybody, thanks for coming.
We've all done that.
Yeah, it's just and it's just so informal. It's like, hey, we'll see you next week, as though it were, some kind of a, I don't know what other kind of event.
Well, just like a normal get-together.
A meeting or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, whatever. But man, what we do in a worship service is huge.
Yeah.
And what God does in our hearts is great. And so when we're being sent out then from our worship service, boy, we need to be reminded.
Yeah. That's good.
That God is with us, that we are on mission, and that our worship doesn't end because we go to the lobby and get coffee.
Yep.
Our worship continues; it's unceasing. So that's kind of a cool thing, and I was definitely encouraged to think in those types of terms from the class as well.
Yeah. So how would you say that our church, Edgewood, is different than perhaps like a seeker-oriented church or an attractional model that, you've been a part of that kind of church before? I have. I think Pastor Brian has in our past. So
Right.
we've seen that model, but Edgewood isn't that. So how do we differ, and how do we approach things differently in that sense?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I want to be sensitive, because I don't want to bash.
Oh, sure. Right.
I believe that God has used seeker-sensitive elements and seeker-sensitive churches for His glory.
Yeah.
Especially in reaching people. But I've kind of touched on a little bit of just a little bit ago what the difference might be, and it really is that content structure style thing.
That's what I was thinking earlier when you were saying that.
So when you look at seeker sensitivity, it's like it begins with, how can we attract and connect with people who just don't want to have anything to do with church. So we start with this style and structure about, okay, what's going to best meet them or whatever.
Yep.
And then the content is always the last, train, the last car on the train or whatever. where more appropriately we need to start with the content and then structure and then style.
That's good.
I haven't read the book, but I saw it recently, the title of this book, and the title is just very interesting, and it was talking about, like taste, like, so the title of the book was Good Taste, Bad Taste, and then Christian taste. So I'm very eager to kind of look into that and say, I wonder if that has to do a little bit something about, this idea that it's not about whether it's, it meets your preferences or not.
Yeah.
It's about, what you need to, what you need in your life and what the influences that you need.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
So I'll look into that down the road.
So speaking of preferences, how do you navigate that when we have certain songs that, we typically do, and then you add more to that kind of repertoire, but then also knowing that you get requests all the time from people.
Yep.
Why don't we sing that song anymore? Or, what happened to that? And how do you navigate that and kind of your music selection, but then also, pulling in some of the old hymns sometimes, not to just appease people, but because they're rich, right?
Right, yeah. So you think of Edgewood, we're a very multi-generational church.
Yes.
So just in that, that's going to cause us to think through, okay, what type of music are we gonna do? We don't do bleeding edge, cutting edge type of music, new for new's sake, because the thought there again would be, we're doing the new thing style, because we've got some agenda to connect with people. So we're looking at a multi-generational church. We're like, how can we best give voice to people's worship? So we have a lot of hymn stuff, hymn songs that are in there. But then we also have newer music. I love how Scripture kind of clarifies a little bit for us and gives us some freedom.
Yep.
In Colossians, chapter 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell richly in us as we sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. I mean, there's a variety there. There's a variety there. And we'll never get to know, well, I think we will get to know, but it won't be on this side of heaven, what those songs were that they were referring to. The Psalms, it's great. We basically have Jesus' hymn book. At least the words of Jesus' hymns that he grew up and that he sang when he was with us. So the idea is, okay, we have a variety, and we bring in the old, we mix the old with the new. Some people really appreciate having the hymns, and then we add the chorus elements to it, and it's just kind of a medley type of a approach. I've done that with a number of hymns where I'll write extra choruses to them. Others, they don't really prefer that.
Right. I don't like you changing stuff.
But that's okay, But the heart behind that is I want to bridge the generations. And
I think that's a great way to do it.
And approach that. Again, not everybody's going to be totally have their preferences. Even my preferences don't even get met.
Sure, right? Yeah.
So,
I'm glad you said that, because it's not just, these are songs that you want to do on the weekend. These are the songs that are my preference. I'm sure there's some songs you do sometimes that might not be your first preference, but you're doing them because they're rich. Perhaps our people love them. You're bringing them back. But introducing new things, I think, is always important. One thing that I was thinking of that when we're talking about that is too, some churches, they have a traditional service and a contemporary service. And I don't really talk about this before, but why don't we do that? Why is that not our model to have completely different worship services with stylistically with the music?
Well, as I think of the history of Edgewood and that the late 80s going in through the 90s, we have Pastor Tim here leading the charge on this big transition that was happening in all over this at least this country in worship practices. And I'm grateful that Edgewood decided not to segregate.
Same.
What a wonderful gift that was to us who came later after that time period. So because we do see that was an option. That was a very viable option.
Many churches do that today still.
Yeah, and they still do that today. But to have our church all at the same table, I guess if you think of our worship services as having a family meal, we're all coming to the same table. Yeah. And it's hard enough with 3 different worship times.
Right.
I hear it from people as I talk to people who are like, I haven't seen so-and-so. Mm-hmm. Well, because they attend a different service, and then every once in a while their schedule might change where they're in a different service, and it's like, hey,
you run into somebody
it's like
you haven't seen in a year.
Family reunion. So it's hard enough that we have the separate times as a church. Just imagine if those separate times then were even more separated through like some kind of a philosophical, musical style kind of approach. I'm grateful. I'm so grateful we don't do that.
So Chad, again, I'm sure you get suggestions all the time, comment cards, some of them anonymous. How do you deal with that? How do you, in helping people, perhaps people can be critical, right, when it comes to how we do our worship services, what songs we use. They can be critical of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just people are like that in general, right? So how do you work through that? How do you deal with that in a good way and not take it to heart, and let that kind of bring you down?
Well, I am human. So kind of a short answer to that, I just deal with it the best I can. Yeah. But there is, I think, value in criticism. So I'm not inviting like scathing criticism. So don't hear me saying, "Hey, just come in and just." But I try to see the truth in something.
Yep, that's good.
It also reveals to me, as people share maybe their strong preferences, it kind of tells me where they're coming from.
Sure.
And one thing's for sure, in our culture today, we have been conditioned to be consumers.
Yep.
And we're Americans. We have we're individualistic.
We don't realize how much it affects us.
Yeah, and it just seeps into how we process our world and how we engage in worship. So it's interesting to I want to hear people, but I try to find the truth somewhere in even if it's a really a harsh criticism. It's like, okay, there could be something in this.
There is constructive
something somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really helpful, but like the content is helpful, but the style in which it's delivered, if we get back to that, isn't so encouraging. Yeah. But the thing is, God is using all these things, and God is building this church here, and God He's ministering to all of us in all these different ways and at these different levels. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to hear and kind of get a sense of where people are coming from,
Good.
and maybe there's an opportunity there to try to encourage them if they'll be receptive to it. If there's something that just seems like, okay, this is why they're so critical about this. It's because of this thing.
That's good.
Not that I'm inviting everybody to come and you just
You're right.
unload on me or
Right.
whatever.
Well, I know we're out of time, but just real quick, Chad, if someone wants to get involved with the worship team, the tech team, I know you're always recruiting there. What's the fastest, quickest way to get in contact with you about that?
Right now, I think the best way to get connected with me is to grab me after a service, and then you'll see me grab my phone and get your information so I can follow up with you. Or you can head over to the website, go to the staff page. There's a link where you can send any of our leadership a message through the website, and that same link is also available on the app if you kind of go to the connect, kind of the link at the bottom there.
Good.
I'm looking forward to developing more of a standardized approach to get people into a process.
Okay. Good.
But for right now, reach out to me.
Yep.
I'll do my best to connect with you, and we really there are needs, especially in our tech side of things.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people don't see all the work that gets done behind the scenes to have our live stream up and running, things working all around the campus.
We need lots of servants.
Poor Dave was sick this past weekend, and it took us a while to realize, oh, wait a minute, we really felt his absence.
Right.
Right,
we did.
But again, the Lord uses everything.
Yeah.
So tech and the worship side, we look forward to growing the team. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Chad. Appreciate you joining for the conversation. Man.
Yeah.
It's been
Thanks,
great.
Kyle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you tuning in to the Edgewood 4G podcast. And if you're viewing this, please share it. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, you can leave us a rating and review. That just gets this more, gets it out there to more people. And we just love to continue to share these interviews, these messages with people. But thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Yep.